Hello and welcome back to the Dial Global Virtual Summit. The time to take action is now. This panel is titled, How is the Chief Diversity Officer role driving sustainable change? My name's Sarah Churchman and I'm the Global I&D Leader at PwC International and also the UK firm's Inclusion and Wellbeing Lead. And it's not about me, I'm delighted to be joined by a phenomenal panel today. And welcome to you all to this summit. So I'm going to introduce you all individually. I'm joined by Lauren von Stackelberg, who is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Lego Group. That just sounds such a fun organisation to work for. Ray Dempsey, who is the global, we've just seen the video, Ray, it's fantastic, who is the Global Chief Diversity Officer at Barclays. And Dr. Parul Pandey, who is the Group Director of Talent, Learning and Diversity at Oxford University Press. So welcome to you all, looking forward to the conversation. But before I hand over to you to introduce yourselves a bit further and before I put some questions to you, I just want to set the scene, a little bit of context here, which we've drawn today from the latest Gartner research, which says, rather worryingly, that only 35% of HR leaders consider diversity, equity and inclusion as a priority for 2022. Now, I don't know what planet they're on, but they need help, surely. And contrast this with 76% of employees and job seekers saying that they want a diverse workforce when they're evaluating organisations and considering whether to join them. So here's the rub, the common challenge. 36% of HR leaders say that they really struggle to hold business leaders accountable for DEI outcomes. And they state that low diversity in the leadership pipeline is a really big problem for them. So we're going to hear from our panel of Chief Diversity Officers today about how their organisations are really driving action with top-down accountability to deliver change. And before we get into the detail and some of the great questions that we've got lined up, let's hear a little bit from each of you about, why be the Chief Diversity Officers? What are you passionate about? Why are you in the roles that you're in today? So, Lauren, could I ask you to kick that one off?
Of course. Hey, everyone. I'm Lauren von Stackelberg. My pronouns are she, her. And as Sarah shared, I'm the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the Lego Group. I've been really working in service of equity for about 15 years now. So leading diversity and inclusion through microfinance, banking, technology, travel, consumer. For me personally, and I'm assuming you won't be surprised since I work for a company that believes children are our role models, I get out of bed every day to do diversity and inclusion work because I think we need to ensure the generations following in our footsteps don't inherit all of the inequities and biases and self-limiting beliefs and grow up steeped in the same systems of oppression that we've experienced in our lifetime. And so to me, it's an opportunity and an obligation to just make the world a fairer place than we found it, and to really play a role in working towards solutions, kind of progressing human rights and protecting and saving human lives.
Great, Lauren. Thank you so much. Ray, can I come to you next? Can you hear us, Ray?
Lauren, I could hear you perfectly. I am really struggling with Sarah, and I don't know if it's my bandwidth or something somewhere else, but maybe to keep us going, if you can hear me, I'll jump in and quickly introduce myself, and hopefully it'll all catch up. So my name is Ray Dempsey. It is such a great privilege and pleasure to be here. I always look forward to the Dial Global Summits. I learn so much. Oh, I could just hear Sarah coming back in, but it's still breaking up at my end. So I'll carry on. I always learn so much, and it's a special honor to have the chance to participate by way of being on a panel like this. So I have been the Group Chief Diversity Officer at Barclays for now 19 months. It's been a great adventure. I've learned a lot already about financial services, having come to Barclays after a bit more than 30 years at BP, where I worked across just a wide range of businesses and functions. I'm an engineer by background. I picked up an MBA, and indeed I've done jobs across a very wide range of fields. What I didn't appreciate for a long time, though, is just how my breadth of experiences were contributing to my preparation to do this role, leading diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think the reason I have such a passion for it is I've seen the benefits, the value creation when organizations, companies, firms, governments get it right, and I've seen the consequence when those same groups get it wrong. And I'm just determined that we find ways to not just lean on our very good intentions, which many of us have had for decades and decades, but that we bring to life the full execution of those things that will make us all more diverse, equitable, and inclusive.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ray. And I'm so sorry I'm not reaching you.
It's real time now. It seems working better. So good.
Marvelous. Phew. Oh. And last but not least, Parul, tell us about your motivation. Why do you get out of bed in the morning?
Why do I? Oh, yeah, that's a lovely question. So, yeah, as you would have seen from my role, I look after diversity and other parts. So it's really like, through other facets of HR, I grew into diversity, and I'm not sure I can take the full credit of really choosing it. I got chosen for it sometime in the middle of my career a few years back. And that, I think, probably came from the passion that kind of exuded in every interaction that I had. So there is a basic belief that I bring to the table around the magic that teams can experience if each one feels safe and included. And with that, I've actually, with that belief, I've actually worked with teams and organizations and senior leader teams for a long time. And each time I did work in that area, I realized that it's not just about every person feeling safe and included, it's every person feeling safe with the whole full background that they bring to the table. So a lot of us feel safe in the known areas. I could be playing a role of head of HR or head of whatever, or I could be playing a role. But can I feel safe being a mom here? Can I feel safe belonging to a race which is minority in a majority? That nuance, I think, kind of came alive for me every time I worked in this area, and I grew into diversity and inclusion. So I feel really blessed that now I'm full-fledged looking after that, contributing to organizations, particularly OUP, through the whole conceptualization of strategy and implementing it, bringing it come alive in people's experiences. So that's why I get up every day and come to work.
Fabulous. Thank you, Parul. And slightly different, I mean, great stories, all slightly different, but clearly what you all are is making change happen, and you are change makers. So I feel privileged to meet you all today. Thank you for that. I've got lots of questions, but I'm probably going to focus on 3 questions because I sense that we'll have a lot to talk about. And whilst please all do chip in, I'm going to actually, direct a question to each of you if that's okay. But that doesn't mean that you the others can't respond. So, Laura, can I start with you if that's okay? And the question I've got is, how do you see your role as Chief Diversity Officer supporting your organisation's performance?
This is a question I absolutely love answering. And I think actually the Barclays video touched on it a bit around just where companies are on their maturity curve. Why do I say that? To do this work well, diversity and inclusion should touch every part of your organization. And I think a lot of people see it as an HR-centric topic. And don't get me wrong, HR is a critical partner in kind of your people, your talent, your processes. But the nature of the work is company-wide and it's holistic, right? So it might span human resources, inclusive marketing and communications. It could be accessible digital technology, inclusive design, supplier diversity, and more. It really kind of underpins the way you do business, and it really future-proofs your business. You asked why. So first of all, how are you going to authentically represent and innovate for your customers and communities if you don't reflect them and understand their needs deeply in your own house? How are you going to live the values you espouse into the world? I think that's a really important question to reflect on. As important as diversity and inclusion is to consumers, we heard the Gartner research, right? It's incredibly important to talent. And so we have more and more folks proactively seeking diversity and inclusion in their interviews, prioritizing companies with inclusive benefits, So D&I is a core tenet of how you'll deserve to attract and retain talent in the future. And then lastly, look, the world's getting increasingly digital from a transformation standpoint. And so when you enter into e-commerce or the metaverse or gaming, or you're building just digital tools for your talent, you have to prioritize platforms that are accessible to everyone, right? If you don't have inclusive design and accessibility expertise, you could narrow your market. And so I wanted to give you a quick example of, what does this theory and all these words look like in practice, right? So if you take the Lego group and you just start thinking about kind of binary gender, let's say that there's an opportunity where you prioritize gender balance in your hiring efforts through targets and goals. You work into people policies and practices around equal parental leave, around investigating menopause. You work on brand campaigns around girls. You'll see it in our product portfolio, right? So innovations like Women in NASA, you'll see it in external partnerships, building pipelines for girls in STEM through partnerships in Women in Data, UN Women. And then lastly, you'll even see it in social responsibility and really the role we play in communities, right? So the partnership with UNICEF around child rights and development to really look at discriminatory norms, stereotypes, and practices and how they impact children and girls in particular. And so I hope that illustrates a bit about kind of scalable impact across an organization. But to me, if we're coming together, we're embedding D&I into everything we do, we're just creating kind of more equitable opportunities and outcomes for us all, and delivering products, experiences, and communications that are really inclusive of everyone. And I would love to hear from other folks in the panel here as well.
Great, Lauren. Thanks so much. I mean, that's a really comprehensive answer, and you're absolutely right. It's not just HC, it's organization-wide. I love that. Ray, Parul, anything to add there, or specifically some examples, perhaps?
Yeah, I think clearly, being Oxford University Press, being while headquartered at Oxford, is spread across more than 50 countries. And one of our divisions, which is Education Division, is, while it's spread across in different countries, also producing locally. So our content is done locally for local consumption. And then the other divisions are doing a lot of content for the rest of the world from 1 or 2 countries. So exactly the same logic for us as well. If we do not reflect and respect our customers, if we do not represent our customers, the content doesn't land the way it needs to. So we actually take our responsibility of almost shaping the thinking, shaping societies, shaping learning, and next generations, particularly a lot of it is education content, very seriously around what is our stance on a lot of these topics around diversity. So we take a lot of effort in engaging with communities who are our users, bringing in experts who help us look at the content and make sure that it lands with the same message, with the same spirit as we intend for it to. So yeah, just building on that.
Thank you, Parul.
Sarah, I'll build maybe just for a few more moments. I love the way Lauren and Parul talked about it, and I agree completely the things they emphasize. There's another element of this that we talk about now often in Barclays, and we call it license to operate. And what I mean by that is increasingly our stakeholders in the world around us care very much about what we are doing, the progress we're making, and our commitments to close any gaps. And when I say the world around us, as a financial services institution, we are subject to regulatory focus, and our regulators are paying a lot of attention now to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just 6 weeks or 2 months ago now, I spent 90 minutes with the regulator in the UK as they prepare to issue consultation papers on the way that they'll engage on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just regulator though. There's legislative focus and real law now setting out expectations and requirements. There's investor focus. The amount of time now I spend with investor relations within Barclays and engaging with our key investors is meaningful, and they make choices now about who they will invest with as a function of their understanding of genuine commitments and progress and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our clients increasingly make this a criteria in the selection of the banks with whom they'll choose to do business. And there's been many examples brought to me of fabulous banking opportunities that we didn't win because our pitch team or the messaging and the language around our commitments in diversity, equity, and inclusion weren't clear enough. So in ways now that absolutely shape our ability to be in business, there are stakeholders who literally hold in their hands our license to be in the business that we are in. And that really converts this conversation for business leaders away from this just being the right thing to do or a good thing to do. It really shapes a genuine business imperative.
Great. Yeah. Very comprehensive answers. Thank you so much. I mean, for many years in my role as kind of the I&D leader, or in the old days, we were just the diversity leader, right? But I lost track of the number of years we spent trying to make the business case for this agenda. I mean, I think it's really clear. It's so very clear to me, and I think to most organizations today. I think the real challenge is kind of living up to expectations of all of those stakeholders that you've talked about. But no, thank you for those great answers. Really appreciate it. So my next question now is, and this, this is a tough one. So this is rotten, Ray, that it's coming to you first, because the others have got a bit of time to think about it. But the question is, what's the biggest challenge you've faced as Chief Diversity Officer? And more importantly, how did you overcome it, if you have?
Wow, that's a great question. If you watched the video a short while ago, you heard me talk about this work is often feeling a bit like pushing a very large rock up a hill. And there is truth to that. It's also, though, it's easily the most rewarding work that I've done in all of my career. But if I think about what is the biggest challenge, it probably is best illustrated in a story of an experience from some years ago. I went to a site for the company I worked for and did a town hall presentation about our work in diversity and inclusion. And it was really well received, some great questions, some great dialogue. And at the end of it, a gentleman walked up to me and introduced himself, and he said, "That was great. I really, really enjoyed it. A fabulous conversation. I really like the way you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion." And they said, "But I have to tell you, this is not really a priority at our company." And I was a bit taken aback. And of course, I was surprised given the other things he had just said. So, but I inquired, "Well, that's interesting. I hope you're not right. Tell me why you think that's true." And he said, "My boss talks to me every day about safety. I understand how important it is to the enterprise. I understand the value when we get it right. I understand the consequence, sometimes life and death consequence, when we get it wrong. I know it's a priority at our company." He said, "My boss talks to me every day about cost stewardship. I know the implications of the way that we do our work and the way we use our resources wisely in service of the results that we create in our business. I know the value created when we do it well. I know the consequence when we don't do it so well." And then he said, "My boss has never said a word to me about diversity and inclusion. So you come and you visit, and it's a great conversation, and I understand, and I love the ideas. But my boss talks to me every day about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not going to be the thing that I focus most on. The other priorities that are the things that are clearly the priority to my boss, that's what I know is a priority for the company." And it was a revelation to me, because I realized that my job actually wasn't to just be an ambassador, an evangelist for diversity, equity, inclusion. I couldn't change the company just by way of the things I would say on a webcast or in a town hall. And that really the most important thing for me to do was to equip and enable leaders at every level, right the way through the organization, to talk clearly and powerfully about where we are, where there are gaps, and what we must do, and to demonstrate their shared ownership and accountability. And that really shifted the way I think about this work. It shifted the way that I recognize that big middle that we often talk about in the DEI landscape of practitioners. And Sarah, it would be foolish of me to say that I have solved this. If I had, I'd probably be on a beach and enjoying retirement. There's still more to do, but I have shifted in the focus of the things that I try to push for, and the transparency that I seek to create for our data, so that people everywhere can see very clearly where we are and where there are gaps, and understand differently their role in the work that we have to do to close those gaps.
Thank you, Ray. That's such a good example, I think, of the challenge. And I personally, I can absolutely relate to that. So one of our priorities in my own organisation at PwC is leaders setting the right tone from the top, because it's what they say. It's not only what they say, of course, but it's how they behave themselves as kind of role models for this agenda. So yeah, I can really empathise with that story. Not sure I can place it though to a moment like that when somebody really brought it to life for me. I think it probably took me a bit longer to twig what was required, but that's a great story. Thank you. Lauren, Parul, any other examples you'd like to add or thoughts?
Yes, I was waiting for Ray to say he solved that, and he was going to be my first phone call after this panel. But I guess we all persist in working on it. But it's definitely a challenge that resonates. I think for me, and I'm going to use a made-up word as my biggest challenge, but it's a word I use a lot, which is globalization. And it's having an agenda that's global, but actually resonates and is kind of authentic locally, right? And so diversity and inclusion, I think in a lot of countries or contexts, it's seen as a kind of colonial export, right? It comes from the US or the UK or a company headquarters, and it goes out into other countries or other markets. And I think we can't really expect shared accountability when people aren't seeing themselves and their context in the agenda. And so the challenge I'm constantly tackling is, what does this mean in various kind of societal contexts for global companies? How do we take this as an opportunity, right, to marry up our global goals and strategic priorities with kind of local and regional customization and cultural context? Wouldn't say I've solved this either, so Ray, don't call me right away. But I think that's where what we call employee advocacy groups or councils or task forces, really communities on the ground, and staying connected and listening. Your output's really as good as your input. And so making sure that your diversity inclusion team also has a global footprint. And then I think the last thing I'd ping within there is you also look at the difference in the ways that people work, right? When you have hourly populations and salaried populations, and making sure that there's no inequity inherent in how those folks access communication or events, how managers are engaging with them, how much access to leadership they have. And so really being very thoughtful about the global, the local, and then how do retail workers, production workers, folks in call centers or customer service centers get equitable access to this agenda, because none of us would have jobs without those folks as well. And that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, great thoughts, Lauren. Thank you for sharing. And Parul.
Yeah, I think I can completely resonate with both the leadership as well as the global and local challenges. Lauren, just to share a little bit, and what we did last year was that we actually decided to build bottom up and feed into a holistic D&I strategy. And that really worked, because it came, the whole local agendas, they came alive, and we made those the local goals and added those up and added something like a global flavor to it instead of the other way around. So far, it's working. I wouldn't say we've solved it fully, because a lot of our global initiatives don't catch enough attention and mind space as the other way around. But it's a good balance. I think we are striking a good balance. Another challenge that I have experienced is when you're looking at anything which is global, it's not just about region, but it's also about multiple identity groups. Invariably, one of the identity groups or a couple others will feel not fully there. And there will be conversations between these groups which at times derail the bigger intent of inclusion of all. So I'm still trying to figure out a balance between how do you include all while having nuanced attention to all identity groups. And it's an ever evolving set of identity groups. So on one hand, intersectionality seems like a great solution, but in actual implementation, you end up having loads of identity groups having very different expectations. How do we co-opt all of them and think about more holistic approach? I think I'm yet to find a solution to that, but I look forward to hearing more on that.
I think, Parul, that's I'm hearing that a lot at the moment in other diversity officers that I speak to. And I don't know, Lauren or Ray, whether you've got any thoughts on that particular topic, because I think that has become probably a more visible challenge over the course of the last few years, probably sort of as a result of the pandemic.
We have talked about this in Barclays, and Parul, it's a great observation. It's a real challenge, and maybe we'll have to form a commiseration committee, because I don't have the suggestion that we've solved it. One thing that's come to us is that, particularly in the last 2 years or so now, there's been quite an emphasis on race and ethnicity, much of it prompted by the tragic killing, the murder of George Floyd in the United States. And the reason it's meaningful is that in many of the geographies where we've been driving this work on diversity, equity, inclusion for some time, there's been more of an apparent focus on gender. And that's not wrong. And it was entirely needed and appropriate. But there's a sentiment now that with the shift in our focus onto race and ethnicity, that we're now turning our attention away from other agendas. And it isn't clearly just about gender and race and ethnicity. You heard in the video about the 6 intersectional agendas we pursue in Barclays, and that's actually probably not a full breadth of all the dimensions of difference that matter. And so the struggle we have is to provide the assurances that we really do care about all those dimensions of difference. We really are working to cause greater inclusion across all those dimensions of difference. Not all of them lend themselves in the same way to metrics and ambitions, and that's part of the challenge. But all of them create the opportunity for us to recognize where there are gaps in the way that we are truly inclusive of those differences, the challenges, the lived experiences, and really honor those differences in a way that we see the value that they bring. So it's something that we're determined about. We're trying to be more thoughtful in our communications and messaging to ensure that that balance is presented. But we can't be apologetic for adding focus and attention in areas where there previously hadn't been enough. And so that's the balance we have to strike.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I think one of the challenges I think we've created for ourselves to some extent is many of us activate on certain days throughout the year. So we may have an International Women's Day celebration or Black History Month or Pride. And I think that has started to feel to people like those are the moments for those communities, and those are the chosen communities. And if they don't see themselves reflected in a certain celebration or an activation date, it feels like it's not a priority. And so one of the efforts we've been undertaking that's been impactful is shifting and having an inclusion month once a year, and really having a variety of events underneath that umbrella to talk about shared accountability and inclusive leadership, and to really progress. Yes, there are dialogues within that, right, about anti-racism and about accessibility and different components, but it's invited more people in. And some of the feedback we've had is, oh, I didn't identify as part of this community, so I wasn't going to that event. But I am engaging in Inclusion Month because it feels like there's more kind of learning and space for me. I think the other piece is inclusive design. I would shout out Fearless Futures on this one, right? It's not just making targets or metrics for representation. It's also coming back in to say, hey, when you're building a people policy, what's the framework with which you're actually embedding intersectionality into that? And how do you think about who's been unintentionally harmed or excluded by the way you've done things? And how do you redesign? And so when you're looking at your healthcare plans, how are you looking at gender transition or familial realities and structures? How are you looking at who has access to various mental health support? And so it's just really giving people the confidence transparently back that when we're building people policies, these are the questions, the intersections, the ways that we're looking at identity. And if there are some that we've missed, there's a feedback loop to know that you'll be heard and seen and valued in that process, so that we're constantly, we know better and we do better. And so those are maybe 2 small ideas, certainly not fully successful in implementation, but 2 paths maybe to help go forward.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, no, super helpful from all of you. Thank you. I know I'm chairing this panel, but I also feel I'm slightly in therapy here, because it's really comforting to hear the challenges, but also some of the solutions or the approaches that you're taking to overcome them. So this is really helpful. Thank you. I hope the audience is too. So we're going to go into the third question now. How does diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity play a role in shifting, changing employee engagement? That's a broad question. You might come at this individually in many different ways, in a variety of ways. But Parul, shall we come to you first on that one?
Sure, Sarah. So you're right. It's such a broad question. And I also was thinking about, where does one start? I thought it's important to figure out within OUP what we've done and how it connects up with engagement. So, we look at engagement as two energy cycles. The one energy cycle is the one that consumes energy that Ray was talking about. We have targets and we have objectives and we have orchestration of effort. All that comes very naturally, normally in the due course of a business. All managers and leaders are already talking about it. This is the energy consuming cycle. The other is the energy generating cycle, which is, in a sense, the engagement that brings people to work, something that wakes them up, and that's why they come to work, is around the deeper purpose of the organization. And me as an employee or a colleague, knowing that I can add value to that purpose. How would I know if my manager or the leader is talking more about the purpose, is talking more about transparently creating a path between my goals and the larger purpose, the mission of the organization? What am I doing that connects up? And the third element of engagement that I see is very integral is that I'm trusted and I trust. I'm valued and I value. I feel safe and I create safety, And these three elements are deeply ingrained in any D&I work as well. If we are talking about creating safety, it's not just a generic concept. It is about recognizing that individual who brings their whole selves, feels safe to be authentic. And that's what creates engagement. I think just unpacking that helped us work through how each individual is different, and certain segments of our colleagues need more support. The whole, the whole unpacking of the conversation around equity. We knew that not everybody is seen or heard, particularly because we are an organization that has 500 years of history of being deeply entrenched in a particular country and its legacy. So just creating mechanisms for people to be seen and heard, knowing that they are great talent, they were chosen and selected, but somewhere in the middle in the organization, their visibility reduced. So we started some specific programs. Of course, programs don't touch everybody, but at least they're setting the tone. There is identification of talent from underrepresented groups. There's a whole process of applying and doing a lot of visibility and competition, and then they get in, and it's a 9-month journey where very unique, specific challenges of that group are addressed through creating forums for open, safe sharing, reflections, and so on and so forth. It's not just, that's just one of the programs. It doesn't end at learning and reflection. We are tying it up with our global targets around representation. We want to increase women. We want to increase other ethnic groups representing not only in leadership, but across the whole ladder and all levels. So engagement for us really is deep engagement where we give space to people and they feel trusted and valued. There's another initiative that we're starting around psychological safety. In itself, it could be run anywhere, right? But we want to then nuance it over psychological safety for you to bring your whole selves, all the roles and all the intersection, through the different identities that you bring to work. And any manager can ask for assessment. They can assess their teams and then work through it. So taking the larger initiatives into micro teams to individuals to make them feel that they're connected with the larger purpose. That's how I think where there is an interplay between our D&I work with the engagement work. And we see this deeply entrenched. every time we do a good D&I intervention, like 2 years back, we had the listening exercise where across the world we had sessions where people could just speak about what they're feeling. And that fed into our overall strategy. That year, the kind of feedback we got on our engagement survey significantly peaked. We knew that people felt listened, felt valued, and that showed up. The next thing that we also did was we created forums where we said D&I is not just leadership work. While leaders are taking responsibility, all of us co-own that agenda, and each one of us has to have a role in it. So there's this whole campaign around allyship. What can you do? Can you stand up for people who are underrepresented? Or can you just make a safe place where if people have a different perspective, can they just speak and listen? So the next survey, we changed our questions around, do I know my role in creating a safe environment for others? That shot up our scores even more. Inherently, it also gives people a sense of purpose where they're working alongside the leadership teams in creating an environment where everybody feels safe and included. So yeah, that's really the whole path we are taking, not just top down, but find your role and create that environment.
Absolutely, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Parul. And I could see, I was nodding my head. I could see Lauren and Ray nodding their heads as well. Is there anything more you'd like to add, guys, to that supports what Parul said, or how you're doing it in your own organisation in terms of the alignment with engagement?
I will. I was waiting to hear from Lauren, but she didn't move, so I'll go first. In Barclays, we talk about our approach to this work as being through three principles. They're transparency, accountability, and engagement. So engagement is central to our beliefs about the way that we can create the outcomes that we say we want. I remember pretty early in my time in Barclays, I went to talk to a team, and the leader of that team, a very, very senior leader in Barclays, it was a he, and he said, it'd be great, Ray, if you could just help us get more comfortable with these kinds of conversations. It's just really difficult. It's uncomfortable. We're worried we might say the wrong things. Can you just help us get more comfortable? And I thought about it for just a few moments. And I said, well, I think that might not be the best goal. I think what we might have to aim for is that we just get a bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. And that we give each other the grace and the generosity and the safe spaces in which to say things that might not be the right things, but where we have a chance to learn from each other. We've set out to cultivate multiple fora, multiple events and settings in which people can talk to each other. Very honestly, very openly, in a safe space. Sometimes they're big events and big webcasts that we do around particular ideas or themes. Sometimes they're small rooms, real talk sessions, as we call them, where it's relatively small groups who have a chance to come in and talk about things they otherwise wouldn't talk about, where they have a chance to maybe test their language, their understanding, their perception of what certain things mean in different communities. And that's made a big difference already. It's not a regional application. We've made great progress in this in Asia Pacific, in the UK, across the Americas, and in Europe. And so for me, it's meaningful that we create that opportunity to engage colleagues at every level, right across the bank, in deepening their understanding and appreciation of difference.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ray. And Lauren.
Yes, I will chime in. And Ray, I just went last because I really just could see you nodding and wanted to hear what you had to share. So I'm glad I waited and listened, because a lot of that really resonated. I think for me, thinking about employee engagement, there's probably a few pieces that just maybe build upon what's already been said here. One is there's a balance, right, of kind of what's grassroots and then what's top down. And I think on employee engagement, a lot is done through community and really valuing the what we call employee advocacy groups. Many companies, call employee resource groups or business resource groups, but giving them the budget and the support, valuing them as a future talent pipeline, and really understanding the solidarity, the learning, the dialogue that they are authentically carrying through the organization with our support. I think in addition to that, the Lego Group has really been very focused on democratizing leadership. And so we don't have time to get into it, but if you kind of go and look around at our work on the leadership playground, both of you alluded to that. It's really saying to people, what is your role as a leader? Who do you lead, and how do you lead, and how do you role model? And it's not, you are the leader you're waiting for, right? It's not always waiting for your manager to prioritize something or waiting for your leader to prioritize something. If it's important to you, you should act accordingly and embed it into your work. And as part of that playground, we have campfires. They're built of Lego bricks, unsurprisingly, and they're all throughout the offices, and they're safe spaces that people can go and have open, difficult, uncomfortable conversations. And it could be one-to-one, it could be a small team. And we also have campfire guides that our employee advocacy groups have built to really start some of those conversations, ask some provocative questions. But I think having a common space or a visual symbol of that psychological safety has actually been a really helpful tool for us because it's commonly known kind of globally and cross-functionally. So a few things from me, and I think we're coming up on time. So I'll pass it
to you. Perfect. Thank you so much. I mean, I have taken so many notes, and I'm sure the audience has as well, but we've covered a lot of ground, and I did wonder whether we'd have too much time. What was I thinking? But in terms of, if nobody will be in doubt by the end of this 45 minutes that this is core to business performance. License to operate was mentioned, future-proofing business. I think there was a great phrases that really sum up the relevance of DEI today. Lots of challenges around leadership, around local versus global, around in-groups, out-groups, but clearly working hard and great examples of how you're solutionizing for those challenges. And then finally, engagement is core to all that you're doing. I loved the transparency, accountability and engagement point, Ray, probably because I can relate to that myself. But I think, we're all engaging with our people because that makes our strategy stronger, right? And certainly our action plan more relevant to our people. So it goes without saying, it's been a tremendous contribution from all of you. Thank you so much, Parul, Ray and Lauren. It's been great talking to you. Thank you so much. And my final job is just to signpost to the next session and remind anybody who's tuned in that if you are using social media, to tag Dial Global and use the social media handle #MovingTheDial. And then there's going to be a short break next. We're bang on time. And then you'll have an incredible panel coming up shortly after that. How to become truly accessible and inclusive workplace through a focus on ability, not disability. So tune in then. Thank you so much, panel. Thank you.